It's Friday Cafe Day. So what I'm also going to ask people is just to take a minute, to take a deep breath, and we're going to just take a second to collect ourselves. It's been a busy, busy week. When I talk about Friday Cafe, I talk about Friday Cafe as my oxygen mask. It connects me to like-minded people sitting at our table in terms of what we're doing. We have Ann Henderson, who is, as you probably know, is a consultant to the work that we do here in Connecticut. And you might have heard of Ann as far as her Beyond the Bake Sale publication. It's kind of the Bible for family engagement work. And Ann has been a friend of Connecticut and has helped us in many ways. We also have Dr. George Otero, who is the founder and director for the Relational, and I'm looking at this, and Relational Leadership Institute. And what I would like to do now is to turn it over to our to Ann Henderson.
Hello, everybody. And one of the things that we're doing with Friday Cafe this year is to explore the new family engagement core competencies for the field that NAFSCI has developed. And those of you who sat in last time to hear Maggie Casp talk about these, remember that they're bundled, these competencies, under 4 key areas: reflect, connect, collaborate for learning, and lead alongside families. And last time we focused on reflect, and with our speaker today, we're going to be looking at the connect aspect of this work that's so critically important. So among these core competencies are those that address these critical skills: cultivating mutual trust. How do you do that? Through relationships. Communicating effectively, which means authentically, honestly, transparently, and two-way. Creating welcoming environments where everyone feels valued and respected and honored. And then reaching out actively to families, especially those who might be marginalized or underserved or pushed aside. So today we're going to be hearing from someone I met probably 25 years ago and respect and admire tremendously. And George talks about how you put relationships first and foremost. So George Otero was born and raised in New Mexico, and George wears many hats. He works nationally and internationally. He's a teacher, an educator, an international consultant, a social entrepreneur, a keynote speaker, a workshop presenter, and author. And I would like to add to this, a visionary leader. He and his wife, Susan, operate the Center for Relational Learning and Relational Leadership that's based in Santa Fe. And it's a multicultural learning center, and over 50,000 people have been through its many programs and courses. And for the last 50 years, George has worked extensively with everyone from parents to policy leaders in both the public and the private sectors, and not just in the United States, but he's also done extensive work in Australia and England. And he offers us deep expertise in what he calls relational learning and relational leadership. His passion and skill is in helping all members of a school community put relationships first in everything they do. Now, when I met George, we were at a retreat for community education leaders that was sponsored by the Mott Foundation, and George was its facilitator. And he always says his approach comprises dance, play, dreaming, games, and storytelling. And I can tell you we did all of those things joyfully under his wise and humorous guidance. And I think it led very easily, in my experience, to what he calls an open inquiry process that builds community and stimulates learning and leadership. And I'm going to turn it over to George now, and you can see how he does that for yourselves.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you all can hear me. We have great assistance, and I can now see myself on the screen for a minute. There's positive feedback that we're here. I wanted to take a minute off of what was one of the most personal and touching introductions. And thank you, Anne, for that. I was awake a bit last night and remembering the long association and relationship we've had over the years. And I'm very, very happy to be included in this community since you're so clear about what you want to do, which is be family-facing leaders. That's a new phrase for me, and I'm quite taken by it. In addition to the thank you, Anne, I want to acknowledge the work you've done that I've followed over 20 years that sets the stage for what now I find is my work, and I know will be attractive and is at the heart of what all of us are trying to accomplish. And that's the latest book you have, which I think most people know about. If not, a picture of one. Get your own copy. Everyone wins.
Thank you, George.
Well, I got to tell you, it's too heartening. And your major findings were strong, trusting relationships among families, schools, and communities lay the foundation for all other efforts to succeed. There are others that emphasize the relationship, but that's the major finding that is happening everywhere in every field that is leading us to what I'd like to explore with the group today, putting the relationship first. This way of being in relationship that includes the doing. And it involves a bit of a mind shift change, but not much. It just starts to honor what most of us always feel at a deep level is our purpose and the promise of who we are as human beings. Strong, trusting relationships lay the foundation for all other efforts to succeed. So that's our topic. Your research confirms it. There's a lot more reinforcing that, and I want to jump into that in just a minute. So as it said in the overview, we will now just explore for a bit the core principles and practices that form and nurture authentic relationships between family, school, and community. In other words, we're going to look at the practices just today quickly and have you share some you're doing, and so that we get the right agenda, because the agenda that I'm sharing today is an action agenda. So I'm just gathering my voice a little bit. In a minute or two, I'll probably be hard to stop. I'm sitting out here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and always just trying to think, especially with a group that I can't see too well. It was so much easier with a few others, how we finally establish that first connection. So I want us to keep that in mind. It's great now because they let me see your faces, and I appreciate how many of you are having your video on, because I get tons of information this way that's quite important. My whole career was based on face-to-face and spent years with groups, as we just mentioned, and I'll go through that. real quickly now. So this format, Zoom, has been an adjustment for me, but thanks for the nods and a couple smiles and beautiful backgrounds. I decided today not to wear my tennis shoes. I don't know how this sounds to you all, but I decided to wear my good shoes, and you can't even see them, but I just feel more professional today, I guess. The second thing is, one of the things that I found that I just wanted to share personally, there'll be a lot of ways to do it. It's that significant start in a relationship. If the relationship is first, we put ourselves out first. So parents, whoever you're working with, especially in our roles, because we have, in a sense, some privilege in our roles in the system. The key I've found is, are you available? Are you there? Are you present? And what are the ways you're signifying that? And I'm just trying to do my best face to face. There'd be some other ways, but I'll come back to this, because all the practices I'm suggesting to you allow everyone in the community to put themselves forward, to be available, to be present as they do the work. Otherwise, it does seem to create an unnecessary kind of power differential. I have survived quite well on Facebook. I know many of you are probably not on it and don't like it, but I'll tell you, 3 years in COVID and being in my room here, I have been able to keep in contact with births and weddings and announcements of gender announcements from new babies and ceremonies and good films to watch, all because I can click in once in a while and people share who they are, what's happening, and what matters to them. So that's our foundation, that authentic sense of being who we are. And so I'm going to jump into the rest of the presentation and go now to the slides, and you'll see the framework we're suggesting that would allow us the framework to put the relationship first in all that we do. This slide is just a title slide, but I'm so happy about it. I told the conveners, because now my social marketer happens to be my granddaughter, because you can imagine she knows more about media and marketing than I do, and it offers me my first presentation with color. So here we go. So core principles and practices, and next slide, Vincent. So the introduction was helped by my wonderful friend and colleague, Anne, who's always so dear. And this is the heart of my story related to today. For 20 years, out of the 50 I've been in education, I had the privilege to own and operate a national historic site. You can see it in the middle of the picture, in Taos, New Mexico. And for 20 years, we had 60,000 people of all ages gather for a week or a week long to answer the core questions of how we could create a society that valued everyone and was sustainable. There's history to that. The outcome of it, though, over the 20 years was my practice, and that's in the next slide. If I was with you personally, I'd ask for hands of how many of you have been to Taos or New Mexico and already issue the invitation, but I wouldn't be able to see all the hands at the moment. In that work, and related to putting the relationship first, we kind of discovered together, which is the key of a relationship first approach. A relationship first approach is not about anyone knowing more than someone else. It's about discovering a way forward together. It's completely based as a discovery process. You are never not in discovery in a relationship approach. And so we discovered together that there were probably about 6 ways of connecting ways, by the way, relational ways of learning. And those are play and games. They're kind of on the same side of the coin. There's stories and dialogue, and there's art and ceremony. There are others, but hardly anything we've mentioned. The dance, whatever, I could give millions of examples. Those 6, and I'll come back to them with examples during the rest of the presentation. But if you're looking for practices to make sure you're putting the relationship first, your engagement with others will probably come in one of these 6 ways. So it's a good cheat sheet for you all and easy to remember. Play and games, stories and dialogue, art and ceremony. Dialogue, simple. It's just when it's a conversation that when you enter it, you can't know the answer when you start. Now that's fun and quite exciting. And I'll show you some ways we've had the full family, school, and community participate in what we'd call real dialogue. It's risky in a way, but it's the only way to go. So let's move on. That's just the learning from my story. So as I start real quickly, the one thing about relationships is there is no recipe. So if each risk, for instance, I have 2 daughters, and what worked for my oldest daughter didn't seem to work for my youngest daughter. So the only recipe, which we'll look at later, that the only thing that mattered was whether I was offering unconditional love as the context for what we were doing. And I'll mention these, all these slides circulate and relate the principles and the practices. And I want to make sure I get to a few more before you talk to show you how fantastically exciting it is to make the mind shift we're now going to talk about. But one of my favorites, to make sure it's not a recipe, is Font's law. When attempting to open a locked door with only one hand free, the key will be in the opposite pocket. This is to bring some hopefully cosmic relief to all of you as we look at trying to do more than we can really do. Yeah, it's always a mystery in the end of what really connects. But we can talk about that. Lovely, already getting chats from every time, every single time. Well, lovely comments already. Okay, next slide. You get to talk about all this in your small groups. That's what I'm here for. So with the relationships first approach, everything starts and ends with the relationship. We know that now. I have a new book you all want to look at, longest term research in the world, called The Good Life, just published. And the inside cover says, after an 80-year study, what makes for a good life? A fulfilling and satisfying life, a happy life. The answer, relationships. Plain and simple in every field, in every way. And I'm sorry to mention it again, because I know you've heard this over and over again. We know the relationships matter, but the question is how? And how do we lead in building and participating in those relationships? So I want to get on to that because we know the topic, but what we've had some success at finding is what is the way of being relationally that makes the difference. So one thing we've always mentioned, and one thing always inspiring me, is that the quality of the relationship will determine the quality of the work that gets done together. The quality of learning always depends on the quality of the relationship. And so next slide. All of these could go on forever. Now, our theme is connection. So we all have experience listening for connection. It's who we are. Think of the young baby as it's born. It's listening for connection. And we know what the trauma-informed field tells us: if that connection isn't made, if the connection isn't reinforced through touch, recognition, smile, then we know life, the human journey, is not what it's meant to be. And you know all of these. I know I'm covering every area you talk about every day, but I'm trying to focus on the power of relationships and relational leadership. So next slide. So here's the first practice. I found this works all the time. No matter what you're doing in any relationship, first and always activate well-being. In any culture, any tradition, any group of people, at any time, we did it again this morning, we activate well-being because well-being is not an outcome. Thank goodness. Guys, isn't there enough to do? Well-being is a state, and that's activated as we meet and greet, as we welcome and embrace, as we accept, as we honor, as we acknowledge, as we invite. So these become the principles that we operate in if the relationship comes first. And that's first and always where we go, activating ours and others' well-being. So I'd like to take one of the key other tools is a quick pause. And I'd like to take 30 seconds and have you just on your own table or in your mind, mention one of the ways you have found that you successfully have activated the well-being of families in your interactions. What's one of your little favorite ways that you activate well-being? These are clues: meet and greet, welcome, embrace, accept, honor, acknowledge, invite. So how we communicate. If we're going to put the relationship first, we have to pay attention to all the ways we're communicating. You mentioned some in your activation. So let me show you this next slide. Is that there a slide up there? Oh, my granddaughter put it on so it came up like over time. See, it's great to work better together with folks who know what they're doing. So we know, and this is the model in communication, only 7% of your communication relationally is verbal. So all this time we spend on guidelines and going over policy statements and all the rest in the verbal, I don't know, it starts to lose its effect because it's only 7%. So how can people trust it? When we know that human communication is around, these are good estimates. I can back them up somewhat. Nonverbal is 43%, just your stance. That's why Zoom's good, but it misses something, doesn't it, when you have face-to-face? But then look at 50%. Intuition, feelings, emotions, tone. We read all of those things in each other. We're communicating those all the time, as many of you mentioned. For example, my favorite story on this, and then I'll go on, is here in New Mexico. Is a great place if you want to learn from other cultures and traditions that are still whole and thriving. And in Navajo culture, when the baby is born, they have a tradition that activates well-being. And the whole extended family waits till the baby smiles. And when the the first person in the extended family that the baby smiles at, they have to throw a party for the baby and the whole family. Now, what? I mean, I have hundreds of examples, you do too. We do this naturally. We're meant to connect. That's what relationships are all about, is coming into our full flowering as human beings. And it's a process that's natural. Being connected is natural to us. What happens is we live in institutions and systems that try to breed fear, in which we disconnect from our connectedness and from each other. There's another whole talk. All right, next one. These are just the key ones, and then we'll jump to a few more of the practices. This is a map I found I needed a long time, because everyone knows relationships are important. But what happens is we tend to see the relationship as a factor in getting tasks done, right? Oh, if I talk to people and set it up and I'm friendly and smile, then we can get our tasks done and they'll be better done. This is a myth. This is not what relationship first means. The next slide, thank you, will tell us. Oops, no, well, there must be another one. Maybe I missed it. Okay, well, there's what you call slippage. You ever run into that, where you thought you had something in and you didn't? So, darn it, that's too bad. Go back to, so after this, here's the key. See all those tasks? Those go inside the relationship. So if you put the relationship first, that's no longer the task, that's the way you are. Because we know it's not what you say and what you do in the tasks that matter, it's who you are as you say and do what you do. So if you put those tasks inside the relationship, you now understand in a model what relationship first means, which is attending to and living within the relationship. It's a way of being, not a way to get things done. So next slide. So we have found over time that, like all of life, it's developmental. Relationships aren't static. And we find that if you want to build them with families, especially when you have so many people to deal with, and different family relationships with you will be at different parts of the development process. And we found that relationships develop through four, I wouldn't say stages, but usually four patterns. First, you recognize each other. You notice something similar, you notice something different, you notice something valuable, they notice you. Second, you move to understanding. That's called year 5 in Australia, or grade 5. That's where the universal research indicates that they understand then that this is not about them, and they comply when they need to and get as much as they can. I don't mean to be a little negative, but the research is pretty clear from years 5 through 9, all performance for all kids of any status of clan go down, because they understand that it's not about them. But if you do understand it's about you, you move to valuing. And then you get the list you had at the beginning of this session. People begin to value their interaction with each other. They begin to see the benefit of being with each other. They love the fact that their life is not just lived in isolation, but is connected and has potential in so many ways. And once you get to the valuing, you can get to what we're talking about, which is co-creating relationships together, which is the goal of a family-facing approach. And as you move up, I don't know if it's up, but out, larger, fuller, there's more personal satisfaction, higher happiness, more joy, and your intent, which comes when you recognize and start sharing, leads to higher and higher impact. Again, this is an adventure we call in discovery. This is the approach to putting the relationship first, entering a discovery process all the time. So, next slide. Oops. Oh, I think we had to go to the other slide set, right, Vincent? Okay. So there is, just a second as we get to that, we may come back. I want to show a couple. I've timed myself and failed miserably at getting through everything quickly. But I get the feeling as we now look at, while Vincent puts up that other slide tape, we start to move to the implications of putting the relationship first. And I want to just have you, Vincent, move through a couple of these slides real quickly. So if you'll go down, I think it's down 3 or 4. Yeah, we'll come back to this someday. Just give me a call. And go ahead. Now, this one. So at this point, one more quick pause before we start looking at the practices we found work to put the relationship first with all of these principles. So this has been known, I just referred to Anne and others, any educational reform strategy that improves relationships has a chance of succeeding. That's just what I read the research showed from Anne. Any that does not is doomed to fail. Doomed. Doomed is a big word for a researcher. They don't like to go that far. But it is, it's doomed. So if we're family facing and it's about the relationship between family, school, and community, then this is the key relationship building. And I've hopefully introduced some mindset changes that will be necessary and some of the practices or principles that will do it, especially the first one, which is first and always activating well-being. And then there are many, many ways, and I'll have some more examples after you all do your dialogue. I'll have a couple minutes to present a couple of these that we have found in England, Australia, all across the US, throughout New Mexico, are guaranteed to allow you to co-create an equitable relationship with the family and community, not for the family and community. If relationship building, relational leadership is central to success, why is this basic principle of change violated so often? This is not punishment, you all. This is good reflection. Remember in the model, reflection's the first step to building connection. So we all get to reflect for a second of what gets in our way. Does you no good to talk about what gets in the parents' way and everybody else's way. What gets in your way of this building and putting the relationship first, living in connection to others without knowing, joining in a discovery process, and think of one way, what gets in our way as family-facing professionals. Humans know because they want to connect. They're built to connect. And when they can't, when they're asked to disconnect, they know what's in the way. The question is, how do we help each other prioritize connection over disconnection? If I'm right, you all came up with not only what gets in the way, but how you're addressing that, how you're connecting. I just, in my group, there were 6 of us, and I'm already exchanging emails because what people are doing to help, not help, but allow people to establish a connection to school and to their education of their children, which resulted in one person having 200 people at an event they thought would only be maybe 30 or 40. So people will tell us what works, and we, in that sense, have to be open to it. It reminds me with the 5 or 6 minutes, well, we've got a couple minutes, which I'm so appreciative of, and I can mention a couple of the strategies we have found that are tremendously successful. But I was hearing people already coming up with ways of connecting that allow you to recognize, understand, value, and now co-create the education you want for the children in our care. And that's the new frontier. This is a different way of operating than, it's not worse than, it's just different than our way of setting up policies, curriculum, pedagogies, programs, and so on. And it's based on one that I remember you mentioned, Anne, to me to mention, that helped me always, which was to take a deep breath, which my wife tells me to do, and I don't do it enough. I see a couple of you taking a deep breath. Take a deep breath and remember that you don't have to control things. That's a difficult one because we all live with the illusion that we ever even had any control. You only have to have children yourself or friends or a marriage to know that if control is your bottom line in a relationship, wow, enjoy the ride because it's going to be bumpy. So you don't really have to give up control in your roles. You just have to give up the illusion that you have any. And children and marriage and friendships and partnerships of any gender and type will help you with that process. So I wanted to go for a minute because we don't have time, although they may be put in the chat, your things that get in the way. I would only emphasize that whatever gets in the way, gets in the way. You know how sometimes we say you've got to have a particular answer? If a parent's telling you something is getting in their way and it's not on your list, you better address it because that's what's getting in the way. And if we can create a conversation in which they can tell us what's getting in the way, then we've got a situation, not a problem. And it's not a deficit to be fixed. It's a relationship to be explored. And I heard great ideas on that. So you get the flow I'm talking about.
Was a question in the chat. You said you had a participant in your breakout session that shared how they got 200 people, 200
Yes.
parents to attend. Would that person be willing to share how they did that?
Well, you know who can share that is Colleen. Go ahead,
Thank
Colleen.
you.
I don't know that we really, I think we're still like digesting it. It happened like probably about 4 weeks ago now. But basically, what we did is we decided we were going to have an SEL night, an SEL like social emotional learning night, and we called it an SEL game night. But we wanted to bring parents in and bring their kids in so they can engage playing games, but also learn some strategies with SEL that they can translate into the home. And normally, for like as long as I can remember, those types of activities usually like you may get like 35 people, maybe 40 people, something like that. And we thought like with the game night, like all right, like maybe 50. So you know, we actually created some games like for the SEL the SEL core strategy, so they could actually, so the parents could actually learn what they were. So they actually, whenever they played an SEL game, they got a raffle ticket.
Oh,
We must have had like, I think we had 12 or 15 different raffles.
wow.
So every time they played an SEL game, they got another raffle ticket. So they got enough. If they played every game, they would get enough to put in every raffle. And some of the raffles were specifically geared for adults. Like one of our raffles was a one-night stay at the Middletown Inn.
Oh, okay. Sign me up for the next game. Okay.
So yeah,
Wait,
it
but
was,
did you put that on your flyer? Because did they know about the raffles before
yes, they knew,
attending?
well,
Okay.
yes, and they knew about the raffles, and basically what we did was we had been promoting it for like about 2 weeks. So our SEL interventionist was going into all the classrooms, talking it up, talking about it, and saying, hey, don't forget about, like, the flyer went out. It went out on the online newsletter. And on the very last day, what we did was we showcased the raffles and showcased them in the cafeteria.
So the
during
raffle
their-
prizes.
Yes, the raffle prizes. We showcased them
Ding,
in the
ding, ding, ding,
cafeteria
ding.
during the
Okay.
lunch waves. So, that was probably also another way that, kids were going home and saying, oh, don't forget, we have to go, we have to go, we have to go. And it didn't quite turn out exactly the way we wanted it, because there were so many people. Like, we did not really expect that there were going to be that many kids and families there.
Okay, so now you have a good problem. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, it was a good problem. It was, and like, I mean, and I think, and after we like debriefed after, the very next day, we said, well, it didn't turn out exactly the way we wanted it, because there were so many people and we didn't have enough hands for us, for like staff wise. However, the biggest goal for us was to get more parents into the school buildings, because we have been struggling with that. And some of these parents that we were struggling with, like, they weren't even coming to parent-teacher conferences.
Right.
So we got them in the building for this SEL night, which was like a huge, huge success.
Yeah.
Kudos, Colleen. So I'm going to turn it back to George. Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
Colleen, you hit every aspect of the principles: incentive, acknowledgement. Incentive is so important. I, again, don't have time to show it, but people want a reason why. Some of my favorite country western songs start with that. I just need a reason to believe. Give me any reason. Just let me start trying. And you did that in all those ways. They always work, because that's back to the natural ways of learning: games, play, story, dialogue, where we can interact, opportunities to connect that have no requirement. I mentioned that in our group. How many opportunities in far North Queensland, when we worked, people didn't want to go to the school. They were so unhappy and fearful. They wouldn't go to the school building, but they'd go to a community dance party and cookout, where they would do the local food and cook it, and then sing and dance and have kids present and do some traditional crafts. Give people opportunities where there's no requirement, but to connect if they want to. We're working too hard to get the task done, and then the task becomes more important than the relationship, and people don't really thrive that way. So the one we've gotten is to, on a couple slides, I've got 2 minutes to show them, because I have committed and learned over time that staying on time is important. Our friend Karen Mapp and the others have talked about a two strategy, dual capacity working with parents. And you all have these, and I know you'll have more sessions on all these. I've found out that with what we've talked about, if the relationship is first, what's needed, and I didn't have time to go over those blue circles you saw, but maybe some other time. What makes a great connection between family, school, and community, which is our topic, are three things. It's a triple capacity approach. So as I'm leaving with you today, and I'll give one example, on your mind as you leave today, our work with the family, school, and community is how do we support each other in creating and living in effective classrooms, but separately effective families, because they're more influential on the kids than the classroom. No offense, but that's the truth. And what about effective communities? Because if we're not part of effective communities, and what does that look like? And how does that happen? So those three are the triple aspect of what makes it. And you have to have everyone working on all three, because effectiveness is not an outcome. It's a way of being, right? The good enough parent. Did it work today? Will I go back for another meeting? So what was effective in classrooms for some of our educators is they started a program of a practice of early early starts. The principal and teachers were available as kids arrived just to talk. But what was more useful was early finishes. The teachers agreed to stop instruction a half hour or 15 minutes before the end of the school day so they could be available to connect with parents if they wanted to. Because what do most parents say? I don't want to bother people. I don't want to feel like, wow, after doing early dismissal and being available to parents if they wanted to, they had a huge increase in participation and ownership and partnership. So I have dozens of them, but we're at times in. My favorite one, if you go down a couple, Vincent, I'll end with this one just to highlight it. I've got all this stuff on effective class, and we don't have time today. What luck. It means it'll be appropriate some other time. So keep going, keep going. Thank you, Vincent. I appreciate it. Here, what we have found is the most effective way to start activating the relationship first. This has been my experience in hundreds of cases, is to do learning walks. And this is with parents mostly, but parents, community, staff, and students. And this is where you have everyone come in and say something if they wish. In other words, it makes sense. What's your favorite color? Just say hello, smile at each other, activate well-being, show a bunch of pictures, ask anyone to look at one that looks like learning to them, let them be the expert. They share that if they want to, because if you have to share, you can't share. If it's a requirement, it doesn't work. Walk around the school. This is all within an hour because we have little time. Walk around the school and in and out of classrooms with 3 questions in mind. What do you see or notice? What does it make you think or feel? Because we know thinking and feeling go together anyway. And what are you now wondering? I've had entire staffs take a learning walk with 3 teachers, parents, and the principal is kindly reminded they don't get to tell people what they're seeing. And so as they go through and see the school from top to bottom or the early learning center, when they come back and share what they saw, what that makes them think or feel, and what they're now wondering, you have a real agenda for partnership and further exploration. I have never seen that fail to activate the partnership. We also have some other approaches that do it. But if you're interested, again, with our time as we end, the learning walk, I have that written up and others, and be glad if you email to give you a start. I guarantee it'll change the way you're relating with your families. Thank
And
you.
so with that, we are going to say thank you, thank you, thank you, George. We really appreciate all of your wisdom this morning. We appreciate Ann being with us. I feel like she's an extended member of our team. We thank all of you that were able to hang in with us.